Hello, I'm Attorney Todd Leneve. Welcome to West Virginia Gun Law. In today's final installment of my series, my conversation with my friend Officer Dave Janssen, we get into, I think, a couple of very important topics, in particular for the folks who have subscribed to this channel, the Second Amendment and the right of self-defense, and the view that a good, competent officer has on those topics. We, of course, see a lot of examples in social media of officers who don't seem to respect those rights, and we've certainly seen enough instances of government overreach when it comes to the Second Amendment that it's refreshing to have a conversation like we will see today here, where we have a representative of the government who actually values and respects the fact that we have an absolute right that's protected under the Second Amendment and tries to conduct his business as an officer in light of that and in respect of that protection. So enjoy this video today. Before we get into it, I'd ask that you please consider subscribing to the channel. If you've already subscribed or are a new subscriber and maybe haven't yet done so, hit that bell icon so that you get notified anytime a new video drops. I'd also appreciate you hitting that like button, sharing this video. Let's do what we can to get this word spread and get as many people organically involved in the discussions on this channel as we possibly can so that we can get around the anti-2A algorithm that exists here on this platform. I appreciate you guys being with us here today. Let's jump right into the video now. Stick around. Saw the other day on X was video from, I don't remember what the anniversary was, but of Hurricane Andrew, when the city of New Orleans sent armed officers house to house seizing firearms from people. And obviously a lot of commentary on that video that was shared.
I'm sure.
And as there should be. Here in West Virginia, of course, we have a law that specifically says it doesn't matter if there's a state of emergency at the federal or state or local level, our Second Amendment rights as West Virginia citizens may not be infringed. There cannot be any limitation, there can't be a suspension of the right to bear arms, and you see a city like New Orleans do it, and boy, that's a pretty high profile situation.
Oh yeah.
And it just, to me, it's one of the things that makes me thankful that I live in West Virginia, where we have a government that, again, while I'm not a huge fan of government, we have a government that seems to value the Second Amendment. We've got a leading gubernatorial candidate right now, Patrick Morrisey, who's a staunch advocate of the Second Amendment. Yeah. We have a legislature that, for all of its other shortcomings, seems to consistently support Second Amendment related issues, and that's great. But with respect to the Second Amendment, what are your personal views? I know you said since you were just a little guy, you've been a shooter. Where do you come down on this?
I like to think that I support the Second Amendment greatly. I've always been a shooter. Again, maybe it goes back to being that '80s kid, right? I've just really enjoyed learning. I would say I was probably like 6 or 7 years old when I first started shooting. Obviously, you start out with the air rifle, the .22, whatever, you bump up. Pretty much taught myself how to shoot pistol from what I remember. I was I was young, right? When it became time to truly learn how to shoot pistol, I would say I was probably like 18, 19 years old, and I didn't have a lot of guidance. It wasn't really until I got into law enforcement where I actually had like true guidance, and I was able to take like a ton of like marksmanship courses and that sort of thing. And this is from the law enforcement side, but like leading into like the actual like Second Amendment civilian side, I think it's mandatory. I think everybody has to have their 2A rights. I've been teaching my daughters how to shoot since they were old enough to hold a gun. I'm struggling with one right now because she's kind of small in stature, so I've kind of got to constantly find those like lighter weight rifles for her to shoot. But I've got some help from an uncle of mine actually. But I support it. I think it's mandatory. I think without the Second Amendment, you have no other true rights that you can protect.
Yeah,
I think
I tend to agree. That amendment underpins every other right that we have in the Bill of Rights. And look at Venezuela. When they took firearms away from the people several years back. I remember seeing video of armored vehicles just running out through the streets, running over people because the government was asserting its authority against an unarmed populace. And I think you take guns out of the hands of the people, and that's what you end up with, a totalitarian state where the people have no rights, they have no say, they have no voice. And I see, in my mind, an alarming trend in our country with a candidate currently running for president, Ms. Harris, making all kinds of comments about wanting to begin restricting Second Amendment rights. And it's not necessarily the face of the campaign, but there's a lot of anecdotal proof that she's very anti-gun. We have a large percentage of the Congress that seems willing to back gun restriction measures. We have courts that interpret against the Second Amendment, and to me, it's all the more reason that people ought to join one of the grassroots Second Amendment support organizations. Here in West Virginia at the state level, we've got the West Virginia Citizens Defense League that puts in amazing work for the Second Amendment. Nationally, you've got the Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, just to name a few, that do really good active work in our courts, literally week in and week out, advocating for Second Amendment rights. And the idea that we have people who would support banning a class of firearms, they just want to get rid of these. Right now. But if they get rid of these, then what's next? Because there will be a next.
The slope.
And
the slippery slope.
Absolutely it is. And I know one time we were talking about this and you made a comment that I'll let you expand on a little bit. If you were ever ordered to go house to house collecting firearms, I think you said there would need to be several more zeros at the end of your salary.
Yeah.
And even then, that wouldn't be enough to get you to go against your convictions.
Yeah, there's like a myriad of reasons why I wouldn't be comfortable in going around door to door on a gun confiscation. First and foremost, I believe the Second Amendment's a thing, right? So ever since their creation, they've been used for defending yourself. They've been used to collect food. There's a lot of reasons why I think guns should be around, and I don't know that anybody's rights should ever be violated because of a government decision. Okay. I know what my standard response time is to get to somebody. You got to think, if you're in trouble and you have to protect yourself, there's a time delay from you calling dispatch and dispatch getting a hold of me and even sending me in your direction, and those are crucial moments.
Sure.
Where that gun might change the outcome of your personal safety.
Well, I often, when I present use of force law courses, I like to make the comment that when trouble is a split second away, help is minutes away at best. Yeah. And that's exactly why. And there's a process.
That's not saying the gun is the answer to every solution by any means, but it unfortunately it takes me a minute to get there to try to resolve a situation. And if you need to protect yourself in that amount of time that it takes me to get to you, who am I to ever get in the way of that?
Right.
Right. Not to mention just the fact that I can never get behind something like that. If the rules that are already in place, your felony status, your domestic abuse, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I get it; those are isolated, but a mass confiscation, I can never support that.
What about the guys that in law enforcement? How do you think the majority of them do they see it that way? Is it a mix?
I'm dangerously close to being considered one of the old guys, right? Like I'm pretty much there for the most part. That being said, the guys that I work with now, I mean, even some of the younger guys, they're avid shooters, they're avid gun owners. Some of them might require like a little bit of guidance or understanding of that. You know what I mean? But that's where I think it's kind of up to the older guys to kind of pass that knowledge along, like the usefulness of it, and to respect it, and to respect the gun owners. Like it is a Second Amendment right that you should not ever violate.